Life has a way of pushing us to the edge, testing how much we can endure before we break. This is the story of Daniel, a young man whose life changed forever, not through wealth, not through luck, but through one simple act of kindness. Daniel grew up in a small apartment in the heart of a busy city. His family didn't have much, but they had each other, and that was enough, until everything began to crumble. When Daniel was just 19 years old, tragedy struck. His father, the anchor of the family, passed away suddenly from a heart condition that no one saw coming. Overnight, Daniel's world collapsed. His mother, a quiet woman who worked tirelessly as a cleaner, was left with mountains of unpaid bills and debts that seemed impossible to clear. Daniel had dreams once, big dreams of studying engineering, of building a future where he could design and create. But those dreams were put aside the moment reality demanded sacrifice. He dropped out of college to help his mother. With no degree and barely any work experience, he stepped into the harsh world of survival. The days that followed were not easy. Daniel applied for every job he could find: cashier, waiter, delivery boy, warehouse assistant. Each time, the answer was the same: "We'll call you if we need you." The calls never came. Weeks stretched into months. His shoes grew thin at the soles. His clothes faded with wear. He walked the city streets with tired eyes, clutching resumes that were often tossed aside. At night, Daniel would sit on a park bench, his thoughts heavy, his spirit weaker than his body. He wondered if life had already chosen defeat for him. He often thought of his father's voice, encouraging him to be strong. But that voice grew faint with every rejection he faced. One evening, after yet another failed interview, Daniel found himself on that same park bench. His pockets were nearly empty. His mother had worked double shifts that day, and still they barely had food at home. He leaned forward, burying his face in his hands, and for the first time in a long time, he let the tears fall. People passed by without noticing. To them, he was just another struggling young man in a city full of problems. But then something unexpected happened. A man, perhaps in his 60s, noticed him. The man's clothes were simple, his shoes old, but his presence carried a warmth. He strolled over and sat beside Daniel without saying a word at first. Finally, the man asked softly, "Son, are you all right?" Daniel hesitated. He wanted to say, "I'm fine," the way people usually do. But there was something about this man's voice, calm, genuine, patient, that broke through his walls. For the first time, Daniel opened up. He spoke about losing his father, about his mother working herself to exhaustion, about the endless rejections that made him feel invisible. His words poured out like water breaking through a dam. The old man didn't interrupt. He just listened, nodding quietly, his eyes full of understanding. When Daniel finished, the man reached into his worn-out coat pocket and pulled out a small brown paper bag. Inside was a simple sandwich and a bottle of water. He placed it gently in Daniel's hands and said, "I don't have much, but I know what it feels like to be hungry. Take this, and remember, your story isn't over yet." Daniel stared at the bag, speechless. It wasn't about the food. It was about what it represented. In that moment, someone saw him. Someone cared enough to stop, to listen, to give, even when they didn't have much themselves. That small act of kindness cracked open a door of hope in Daniel's heart. As the man stood to leave, he patted Daniel on the shoulder and added, "Tough times don't last, son. Tough people do. Keep walking." and then he walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Daniel never even got his name, but he would never forget his face, his voice, or that sandwich in the brown bag. That night, Daniel went home feeling something he hadn't felt in months. Possibility. It wasn't a solution to his problems, but it was a spark. A spark that whispered, "Don't give up yet." The next morning, Daniel woke up with renewed determination. He looked at himself in the mirror and said out loud, "My story isn't over." He took the last few coins he had and printed a fresh batch of resumes. This time he walked into every shop, every store, every office he could find. Most people still said no, but he didn't let the rejections crush him. The stranger's words echoed in his mind. Keep walking. Finally, after weeks of persistence, Daniel landed a job as an assistant in a small repair shop. The pay was low, the hours long, but it was something. And for the first time in months, Daniel saw a path forward. That one act of kindness, a sandwich, a bottle of water, and a few encouraging words had shifted the course of his life. It wasn't the size of the gesture that mattered. It was the heart behind it. Someone had reminded Daniel that even in the darkest places, light exists. And from that day forward, Daniel carried that light with him, determined to build something better. Daniel's first days at the repair shop were humbling. The job was simple: cleaning tools, organizing supplies, and assisting the mechanics with whatever they needed. He didn't earn much, but every paycheck mattered. His mother could finally breathe a little easier knowing there was food on the table and rent paid on time. But the work was not just about money. It became Daniel's classroom. Every day he watched, listened, and learned. He studied how the senior mechanics fixed broken machines, how they dealt with customers, and how they solved problems with patience. The owner of the shop, Mr. Harris, noticed Daniel's eagerness to learn. At first, he thought Daniel was just another desperate young man looking for work. But over time, he realized Daniel had something rare: determination. One evening after closing, Mr. Harris told him, "Son, skill is important, but attitude will take you further. You've got the right attitude. Keep it up." That encouragement fueled Daniel to work even harder. He stayed late to practice repairs, often working on discarded parts no one else cared about. Slowly, he grew more skilled. Customers began to notice his effort, complimenting his dedication. Step by step, Daniel built not just a paycheck, but a reputation. But success didn't come without setbacks. There were days when he made mistakes, fixing one part only to break another. Some customers yelled at him, bosses who grew impatient, and times when exhaustion made him want to quit. Doubt returned like a shadow, but every time it did, Daniel remembered the old man in the park, held the sandwich in the brown bag, and those words. "Your story isn't over yet." That memory became his anchor. He refused to give up. By the time Daniel was 28, nearly a decade had passed since that night in the park. Through discipline, long hours, and relentless persistence, he had saved enough to open his own small workshop. It wasn't too fancy, just a modest space with a few tools and a single sign that read Daniel's Repair and Service. But to Daniel, it was more than a shop. It was proof that broken beginnings don't have to mean broken futures. Yet Daniel's true success was on tea and the money he earned, or the shop he owned. His greatest achievement was the lesson he never forgot: the power of kindness. He remembered how a stranger's simple gesture had changed his life, and he made a promise to himself he would do the same for others. Every week, Daniel prepared small care packages, sandwiches, bottled water, sometimes even warm clothes. Walked through the same park where he once sat in despair and handed them out to people who were struggling. But he didn't just give food, he gave time. He listened, he encouraged. He reminded them that their story wasn't over. One day a boy named Alex walked into Daniel's shop. He was about 17, skinny, with worn-out clothes and tired eyes. He nervously asked, "Sir, do you have any work? I'll do anything. Sweep, clean, carry things. I just need a chance." Daniel saw himself in that boy. He remembered the hunger, the desperation, the feeling of being invisible. And just like the old man in the park once did for him, Daniel chose kindness. He hired Alex on the spot. At first, Alex swept the floors and cleaned the tools, just like Daniel once had. But Daniel didn't stop there. He mentored him, teaching him how to repair, how to speak to customers, and how to believe in himself. Months turned into years, and Alex grew not only as a worker, but as a person. Eventually, Daniel made him a partner in the business. Together, they expanded the shop, hired more workers, and built a thriving company. Daniel often told Alex the story of the old man in the park. "Never underestimate what one act of kindness can do," he would say. "You might think it's small, but to someone else, it can be everything." And Alex listened. He, too, began giving back, helping others who walked in with desperation in their eyes. The cycle of kindness continued, spreading far beyond Daniel's shop. Here's the truth. We often believe that changing the world requires money, status, or power. But sometimes, the greatest change comes from the simplest gestures. A smile, a kind word, a sandwich in a brown paper bag. That old man may never know what his act of kindness did. He may never know that it helped a broken young man build a life, a business, and a legacy. But that's the beauty of kindness. Its impact goes far beyond what we can see. Daniel's life is proof of this. From despair to determination, from hopelessness to purpose. All sparked by one stranger who decided to stop, to care, to give. So what about you? Whose life could you touch today? What small act of kindness could you give that might plant the seed of change in someone else's heart? You may think it's nothing. You may think it won't matter. But to the right person, at the right time, your kindness could be the spark that changes everything. Because at the end of the day, success is not just about what you build for yourself. It's about what you inspire in others. It's about the lives you touch, the hope you restore, and the kindness you pass forward. So remember Daniel's story? Remember the old man in the park? Remember that kindness is never wasted. And the next time you see someone struggling, don't just walk by. Stop, listen, care, give. Because one act of kindness may not change the whole world, but it can change someone's world. And that's enough to make life truly meaningful. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more motivational content. Together, let us spread kindness and remind the world that even the smallest act can create the biggest change.